Grays Harbor. It's, you know, we're doing the first Dan Villopoto memorial race, my dad, so for him, and it's, you know, like I said, everything's been pretty smooth, and a ton of people from Northern California came up, a lot of his old buddies, and we're out here, you know, spinning laps for him.
Riding dirt bikes, it was a natural high. See, Fred's been smoking two-strokes for years and he's out here in the actual. We got a celebration that we're going to celebrate here. And what I hope that you folks do is get against the fence. What we're going to do is we're going to have the entire Villopoto family take a lap for Dan out there. You guys want to see the family out there on the track?
When we decided to do a memorial race for my dad was 58, rode quite often, and you know, the idea of how we did it was to have a short daily schedule, you know, 1 moto a day. Practice starts at 9, we're done by, you know, 2, 3 o'clock. That way that, you know, the older guys that still like to race, that want to ride and come hang out with their buddies, they don't have to be up at 6:35, 6:30 in the morning. They can just come in, you know, we start practice at 9 and we're just, you know, spinning some laps. We do first motos today and then the second motos tomorrow. So it's just a super low key deal. So that my thought process behind everything was, is there's a lot of people that don't want to go spend and deal with call it the crowds or the 7 till 5 at night. You know, my dad would never go and do that for himself. I mean, he grew up doing it, you know, taking me racing. That's what we did. So I definitely see or feel like he would, if he was here, you know, if there was something like this for him, he'd be able to do it no problem, or want to do it, because it's not an early morning and it's not a late afternoon. So yeah, no, I think it's a great thing. I think my dad would have been pumped with it being low-key and not stressful. You know, it was an event, a party, which my dad never really got to do too much of. He really never got to have fun. At the track, it was serious. So the fact that we're all out here to have fun, it means a lot, really. So.
Most people out here, obviously, like super close to my dad and knew my dad, so that's super cool to all conjugate in one location for him, obviously, and a few other people out here. Most people knew of my dad or knew him, so it's good. The turnout, it's perfect, actually. The draw of people, it's pretty intimate. It's a lot of family and a lot of friends, just very few people that I maybe don't know that have been around the local industry, but it's a good event, and it's just to give, you know, memorialize Dan and share that, our loss of him, and just the industry, racing. I mean, most everyone here has raced a good part of their life, or just into it, but it's a passion. You do it, and you know, like I said, it's in them. To not do it is, I think some of them wouldn't know what to do with their life if they didn't do it. So.
Try to catch me howling at the moon. Say no.
I'm Don Lieb. My wife Andrea and I have been very friendly with the Villopotos since probably the early 2000s. And so we met at Ponca City. Ryan was a Team Green rider, and then Michael got picked up, my son got picked up. And so we just ended up, our motorhomes were next to each other. And you know, that week, you know, we bonded. In fact, in Ponca City, there's this really well-known Mexican restaurant we all go to. It's at the airport, which is right near the track. And I remember going to dinner with them. They're on a Zuma. Chris is on the back of the Zuma, and I'm in my truck chasing him, and Dan, he's ripping through traffic. I'm like, Dan, if there's a cop around, you're going to jail. I mean, he was just pinned. He beat us, of course, to the restaurant, but that was Dan. Everything was a race. Everything was a competition.
Back in 1995, I was riding intermediate class, decided to make a stab at being top racing, you know, and tried to national qualify for that national, and Dan ended up being my mechanic, and we went down to Washougal and we had a great time. I was probably a little older than I needed to be, but first pro race ever, and trying to do it, and went down there. Dan was my mechanic, and we were on the line, and he just looked at me and he's like, "You got this," and because I kind of knew that it was a pretty good task to make it in there. A lot of good riders out there for sure, and I just remember that, and it's one good memory. I was working on my bike a couple weeks ago, and just went in my shop, and I was looking at the bike, and I remember Dan on the line beside me quoting that quote, and it was just pretty cool knowing that I wanted to come here and do this memorial race for our relationship, as well as, you know, just being at the races and the camaraderie of the people.
I didn't really meet Dan from racing. I met him from work. We both did construction, so we kind of shared the same interest. And I'd seen him at the races with the kids and stuff, and then we got to know each other better from racing. And then all of a sudden, saw him at Washougal, and he wasn't riding, and asked him what was up, and he goes, "I'm gonna take a break," and work with his kids. So periodically we'd go to California, and I'd see those guys, you know, living in a motorhome, chasing the dream. And Dan he was always our contact to the inside or the sport or whatever's going on. So whether it was something new or high tech or something that was just a shit show, he would always had a good laugh or give you the inside scoop of what was really going on, because he was there and he lived the whole thing. Me and a buddy Joe, we'd all go in my van, and it was like the three amigos. I mean, if he didn't drive, I'd drive, or we always took turns traveling and go to Eastern Washington. And, you know, Dan was always competitive. I mean, we always went back and forth, and, you know, somebody come up behind a lapper, Dan didn't care. He'd either, you know, run up your leg or show you a wheel, and we just had a true friendship that it's tough to replace. So, but as you can see here today, you know, it's one big family, and that's what it's all about. Because truly motocross, you know, brings everybody together, and he would have loved this. guarantee it. I mean, there's all kinds of good times. Every time there was always a laugh, or, you know, taking dogs with you, and Winston would be either sitting on the gas or hitting the brakes for no reason, you know, just because he's walking around the bottom of his feet, you know. So, not one time I would say there was ever a bad time being around Dan. I mean, he was a true friend, and I missed him.
When I first met Danny, we were racing Pac West together back in 1990. Yeah, 91, 90. And so those years went on, and it was a lot of fierce battling. And then I took a road trip with Danny in 94 or 95, somewhere, 94 I think it was. And him and I and David, his brother, and Jeff Nielsen from the Brothers Honda, who Danny rode for and I rode for back then, and Mike Velasco, the famous tuner, the sport bike tuner. We all took a trip down to I don't know, Southern California for a Supercross race. And I tell you, as soon as we got off the plane, Jeff and Velasco went one way, and we went to another zip code. And Danny's in the driver's seat of our rental car. Yeah, that was fun, because he didn't care if we were on the curbs, or we had a blast just hanging on. Me and Dave were laughing, and of course, you know, the rental car, it led to the slick track. They used to have a slick track. They may still have it, I'm not sure.
One thing is when he would, you know, if something was funny or something that he thought was funny, and he started to laugh, you know, he'd have a hard time stopping. Like, he'd one of those guys that, like, and then everybody's not even laughing at what was funny. They're just we would all be just laughing at him. So it's a pretty. Like, there's a lot of instances that would, you know, like where something would happen and then he'd start to, you know, laugh, and then if he really like was laughing, he'd start laughing really hard, and everybody's laughing at him because he can't stop laughing. You know, that would happen fairly often, especially as the racing stuff got mellower, you know. When I was getting ready for Australia, you know, I brought him down for 6 weeks to work on my bike, so we had a pretty good 6 week run of you know, riding and doing some training and stuff. But you know, he was changing my tires and working on my stuff, you know, when that all happened. So that was, I can say, the last, you know, time, that memory, I guess, good one. Other than he was away from my mom for 6 weeks, but I think he liked what he did.
Seeing my dad laugh, you know, like funny things. My dad never did laugh, so when he did laugh, he couldn't control himself. It was uncontrollable when it did come out, because it didn't come out enough. So when you did see my dad laugh, it was definitely something to see. If you knew him as a friend or a family. Yeah, so when he broke out in a serious hysterical laugh, it was definitely something to partake or be there. So.
You know, when I met him, we were already in our early 20s, and you know, he raced all his life. So it was, like I said, it was his. He didn't make it big like Ryan or whatever, but he did ride local pro, and it's just what he did. If someone said you can't ride, I don't know what he would have done. We lived 18 miles apart. I lived in one town, he lived in another. Another thing, God's timing. If I would have met him back in the day when he was chasing and running and doing his thing, I wouldn't have been like, that's not the guy for me. But I met him when I was 21, 22 maybe. Anyways, so it was the perfect time, because even though we lived that close throughout our high school years, I'd never met the guy. And he raced, but I wasn't in that, you know, I knew a couple guys in my town that raced, but I never went to a race, so I never met him. So, yeah, we met in a bar. And from there it was like, you know, it's all good. It was all good. It was meant to be. And there's more to life than this life we're living, people. So it will all come around, and I'll see him again.
He was a quiet person, but he was loud in his own way. So whenever he entered into a room or came into a family function or came to dinner or whatnot, he always said, "What's going on?" That was his thing. So
I'd get a call from him, you know, once every couple weeks if we didn't see each other, or, you know, that's all. What's going on every time.
I could be with him 4 hours and he'll ask me what's going on about 6 times. I said, what could be more going on an hour from the last time you asked me what was going on an hour ago? There's not much more going on, Danny, than there was an hour ago, but yeah, I get it. What's going on, Screwy? You been painting helmets? No, Danny, I retired from painting helmets about 15 years ago, but I'm glad you asked me every time I see you. God, all through the day, what's going on? You getting paid? How's that jump? Did you see me out there? You're riding good. What's going on?
All right, so when Dan would walk into a room, regardless, his statement was, "What's going on?" So that was, everybody knows Dan by that statement. So at the service, I made hats, not wearing one right now, but it's a big "What's going on?" So if you ever see those, yeah, that's what they're for. What's going on, DV?